it's a discussion of the proposed Riverway development, which if you're a keen reader of the agenda, you'll note that staff made a mistake and put that was in District 1. It's actually District 5. So that was a mistake. But no, it's a District 5 project that's along the Brazos River, and we've got representatives here today from CC Waco 521 Land Holdings. That's the Caldwell Companies. Excited for the council to hear more about this project, and particularly using a new tool called a municipal management district. It's not new to the state of Texas, but it is new to us. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Peter and Sarah for an introduction.
Okay, well, thank you very much for having us. We have spent, Sarah and I and our team have spent a lot of time with your staff working on a project that we are really excited about. And I think it's going to be great for the city of Waco, and just hopefully be an icon and something that will stand the test of time that many of us will come back to and look at. So thank you very much for your time and committing the resources on the city staff side to help and make this a reality. I'm sure you guys have probably seen that picture before. I don't think we took that with the drone, but it's a beautiful tract of land. So just a little bit about Caldwell Companies. I have been with Caldwell Companies for 23 years. It was started about 33 years ago by a gentleman by the name of Fred Caldwell in Houston, Texas. It's a family-owned, privately held business, and we love developing really cool places. That is just a real passion of ours. You'll see just up on the screen there just some quick, highlights on things that we've done. We've been at this for a while. 15,000 lots, 12,000 acres, multifamily, both active adult multifamily, build for rent, commercial, and some really iconic spaces that I'll show you some pictures of here very shortly. So just some of the people on the team. As I mentioned, Fred is our owner, and I think a really important thing to note on this slide, and feel free to read bios and whatnot, is that everyone you see up there, with the exception of Dan, who's here with us today and is new to our team, the senior people on our team have been there for an average of approaching 20 years. And that's really important because we'll talk about this a little bit more on this project, but it takes time to develop these. It's not just it's not a 2-3 year deal done and we're out. There's a lot of effort that goes into this. One of the most iconic projects we've developed in Texas, called Town Lake, has had its 20th birthday this year. My youngest daughter was born 20 years ago, so we always link those two together, but they have a life of their own. Just some quick awards and recognitions, not to brag or boast, but it feels good when your peers call you out, and we've been called out many times in a good way throughout Houston and other communities where we've developed projects. So just some highlights and some pictures, logos of some master plan communities that we've built, just to give you guys kind of a sense of the scope of what we've built. We built from 2,400 acres, almost 4 square miles, down to 30, 40, 50, 60 acres. So we've got the breadth of having developed very large, very complex, long-term projects on down to very unique and quaint neighborhoods. All primarily within the northwest corridor of Houston, with one exception. We've got a project called Mission Ranch in College Station. So Town Lake is one I want to hit on because I think we've learned so much in Town Lake that I think it would benefit you guys or benefit the city of Waco in this project. All we've learned about water. And so I had the head of my grad school when I graduated, when I presented my thesis, he said to me, Peter, follow the water and you'll land on your feet. And I really heeded that advice. And this one took it to a whole new level. This was a project that was dead flat Katy Prairie land that we built a man-made 300-acre lake out of that took us 15 years to build. And it has won all sorts of awards across the nation. It is the tagline is a community connected by water. And I really feel like some portion of that vision and that tagline is really going to be what Riverway will be to the city of Waco. It's going to be a community intertwined with all the amazing attributes that the Brazos River has, the park system has, And it's just, it's going to be a community connected by the Brazos. That may just be what it is. Boardwalk is just a sampling of a very unique commercial development opportunity that we built within Town Lake. And it really ended up becoming very much the central focal point and gathering place outside of recreation centers for people within Town Lake. And it was done in a suburban setting where a lot of people said we couldn't do it. And it turned out just beautifully, and as you can see some of the pictures on the architecture, it's well attended. Friday nights we hold 42 events there every year, and it's just it's a fun place to hang out and a great asset to the community. So this is the site location right here. This is 520 acres, bordered on the west by MLK and on the north by Lakeshore Drive and on the south by the Brazos River. Uniquely, a very large tract of land, very close into a community. So whether it's Waco or any other city, it's just very rare to find this. Yeah, the vision, as I talked a little bit about earlier, that we have for this is really just, leveraging the natural beauty that this tract has on the river, taking advantage of activating the community through connections by water, creating a marina that will allow people to recreate on the Brazos and move all the way up and down the Brazos down to the stadium and all the new venues that the city is creating on the water right now. This is a concept plan, very briefly, that shows that on the corner of Lakeshore and MLK, there'll be a mix of commercial and multifamily, and then in the heart of the tract there'll be various and different types of single-family offerings. Some vision images for lots of the different places that we'll make within there and recreation centers. Trails are a huge part of what we do. It is, if you look at the statistics, number one amenity in the entire 30 years I've been in this business across projects is trails. So we do trails really well. We've got a firm that we engage that comes in and does a master plan for all of our trails. We've had many discussions with city staff on these amenities. Just some more fun inspiration pictures of great outdoor spaces. Home architecture will be varied. It's going to be an eclectic mix of a lot of different themes and styles of architecture that just really kind of harken back to home. Hardy siding, things that are just feel soft and warm. Some craftsman elevations right here we'll sprinkle in. So then just high level. So this is a big project. It's a big project for us, and it's an aggressive project for Waco. So it's 521 acres, 2,000 residential units, about 1,100 of those are single family right now on the current plan. Largest master plan community in the heart of Waco. And I think it's important for you to know that you've got a partner that is very passionate about this, and that this is what we do every day. From myself to the owner of the company and people on the team. I mean, we have a tagline, and it's something that we filter every design decision that we do on projects, and it's like, is it going to make someone's life better? And so that's at the heart of what we do. And that starts from the top in our organization and goes all the way down to anybody who's executing on a project. Is it going to make a person's life better? So high level, $620 million plus or minus of projected taxable value at full build out, $102 million in public infrastructure. Something else I didn't mention earlier, but I'll mention right now, is that every single one of these large master plan communities that we've developed over the years have been developed in aid with different public finance mechanisms. They can be TERS, they can be MMDs, they can be MUDs, they have a lot of different names and acronyms in the state of Texas, but they don't make sense without the financial partnership of one of those financial or public finance mechanisms. So we've got two different portions in there, TERS 4, and I'll let the staff get into more detail on it. TERS 4, the increment retained through TERS 4, and then we will also be creating a municipal management district to assist with some of the incremental costs as well.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. You've just heard from the developers of the proposed Riverway development. Staff wanted to provide you some context and background. As Peter stated, if approved, this would be the first municipal management district in Waco. The first part of this presentation will kind of be a municipal management district 101. I know that when we first started working on this deal, this was the first municipal management district that I would have been working on. And so part of this presentation is to help me get it in my head, and so hopefully it'll be helpful to y'all as well. Bradley introduced everybody at the table, but I want to reintroduce Julie Partain, who is sitting to my left. Many of y'all know Julie. She's part of the bond council team that has worked with the city for many, many years. But also, Julie works on complicated economic development projects, both for Waco and all over the state. So to give you a couple of examples, she was outside counsel for Arlington on Cowboy Stadium. And she's also, what is really relevant in this situation, she has worked on municipal management districts all over the state. And so even though I'm going to be handling the first part of this presentation, the Municipal Management District 101, she may jump in when you'll ask a question that goes too deep and beyond my knowledge. And then we'll turn it over to Julie to talk about the deal points for this deal. And then Clint will talk about the proposed zoning. And then finally, Bradley will wrap it up with the financials. So as was mentioned, the developer is going to request that the city consent to the creation of a municipal management district. And as was mentioned, this development's mixed use, but the majority of it is going to be single-family residential. So you are familiar, Council, with what's called municipal utility districts, or MUDs. And so you heard Peter refer to MUDs and MMDs. MUDs are located outside the city limits. What's proposed today is not a MUD, it's a municipal management district, which can be only located inside the city with the consent of the city. So unlike a MUD, an MMD requires, the statute that creates this mechanism requires that the developer have their bonds approved by the council or their 5-year budget. And that 5-year budget is what they base their bonds on. And so that consent and the consent to the MMD means that city can negotiate all kinds of deal points, including deal points on design and density that can be very beneficial to the city. And so as between those two, we view municipal management district to be the preferable mechanism. So again, what is an MMD? It's a political subdivision of the state. So what we are in fact doing is consenting to have another political subdivision operate in our city limits, if y'all approve this. They provide water and sewer improvements to a defined area. They can levy assessments for certain public improvements in that area. So I'm going to analogize that portion of what they can do to being a PID. They have a list of certain things they can assess for. They can impose impact fees. And they also can issue general obligation bonds to fund road, water, and sewer with an election by the residents. They may annex land, but they don't have eminent domain power. They can levy a maintenance and operations tax if it's voted on by the property owners in that MMD. So why would you ever do an MMD? When the area is developed, as y'all know, and this happens in all kinds of developments, the developer is supposed to fund the infrastructure. Upon MMD establishment, the MMD can issue bonds and the developer can recover their infrastructure investment through those bonds. Their general obligation bonds contain an unlimited tax pledge. As y'all are aware, how much we can bond out is limited, but it is at least legally limited, unlimited for the MMD. They're obligated to tax the residents in their district to pay these outstanding debts. It's created by the TCEQ administratively. It's governed by a board of directors, and Julie will later talk about the board of directors proposed for this MMD. And a director on the board of directors must own land in the MMD. Again, I mentioned this earlier, the MMD must obtain city approval for every bond issuance or for a capital improvements budget every year. And that capital improvements budget kind of gives the parameters for what they can issue bonds for. TCEQ must improve their bond issuance for water, sewer, and drainage, but not for roads. And the MMD ultimately can be dissolved by a vote of its board, by petition of the property owners, and by city dissolution. But if the city dissolves the MMD, all the obligations become our obligations, including their debt. So I'll turn this over to Julie so she can talk about the particular deal points.
Let me scooch this over a little bit. All right, again, Julie Partain with Bracewell. We've been working on the Riverway Development Agreement, and so we wanted to give you sort of high level what the business deal points are looking like at this point. If you have any questions, we can take those at the end. So as Jennifer said, the developer is going to request that the city consent to the creation of MM&D. You would have to pass a resolution that consents. That resolution goes down to the TCEQ. TCEQ won't create the MM&D unless the city provides them with a consent resolution. The basic deal point is that the city would contribute out of TERS 4 70% of the tax increment generated by the MMD property to the development. Now, under the terms that we're currently working under, the city would begin to retain some of that 70% starting in year 2030, working its way up to 20% in 2037 and beyond. So there would be some annual retainage out of that 70% starting in 2030, going throughout the life of the TERS. Under the terms of the agreement, the tax increment cannot be terminated by the city, primarily because the MMD is going to pledge that tax increment to their debt. They're going to issue unlimited tax general obligation bonds, and they're going to have what we call a double barrel pledge. They'll pledge their unlimited tax and the TERS increment that comes over from the city pursuant to a contract. Why do they want to do this? Because it lowers the tax rate the MMD would have to levy for their bonds. It allows them to issue more debt sooner, which means the developer gets paid back sooner, which in theory means it develops faster. It also would keep the tax rate reasonably low in order to market the development to home builders and home buyers. So the cost at the back, and I think Peter mentioned it, is $102 million. Now we can go over that. The current deal point allows for an increase of 20% overall of that cost or 10% per line item without approval of the city. Anything above that would have to go specifically back to the city to be approved. You'll see the improvements are kind of your standard: roads, water, sewer, drainage, and parks. Pretty basic. As Jennifer mentioned, they want to pursue the capital improvements budget option, which would mean they submit every 5 years a capital improvements budget to the city, and in that would be their planned bond issuances, and you would approve that. The deal point now is that, again, similar to their overall cost, they can make changes to each 5-year capital improvements budget, but can't exceed the overall cost by 20% or any category, road, water, sewer, drainage, by 10%. Any escalation above those in the 5-year budget would have to be approved by the city. The city would waive impact fees, but in lieu of that, the developer will make two $1.5 million payments to the city, one upon the first building permit issued for vertical construction. The second one would be 3 years after that, and that money would be available for any lawful purpose by the city. It would not be tied to this development. The MMD board would have 5 directors. The developer would submit names to the city. The city has the ability to reject. They would work together to appoint the directors. At least 2 of those must be residents of the city of Waco. As far as the improvements, the water and sewer improvements would be immediately dedicated to the city and be part of your system. The road improvements would be held by the MMD for 20 years and maintained by 20 years, and then dedicated over to the city with a grade of at least 80 on the city's pavement management system index. The parks would be owned and maintained by the MMD, but they would be open to the public, all residents of Waco. This development is large. 521 acres is a large development. It'll probably take more than 10 years to fully develop. There is a phasing plan in place for 16 phases, and the first phase would begin about 18 months after you would approve the agreement if you approve it. The city and the developer have also been working through a design book as part of this process, and I think Clint's going to talk a little bit about what the development standards are planned to look like within the district.
We're going to hand this over to Clint.
All right, so I'm going to go over the development regulation, the zoning strategy. for the development to carry out that vision that Peter was talking about in his presentation. It's structured very similar to the Floyd Casey development, where we have, let's see, there we go, where we have base zoning set up. The majority of the property is currently zoned R1B, which is our standard single-family zoning. And then there's a small strip of C3 zoning along MLK, which is our general commercial zoning. This map shows what the proposed base zoning be for the property. So we maintain the R1B zoning for the majority of the property, which is about 430 acres. That would be for the single-family portion of it. And then the C2 zoning, which is our mixed-use commercial zoning that allows commercial and multifamily, would be that red area, which is about 60 acres. And then R3B, which is a low-density multifamily, would be used for the moderate-density residential. And then the second part of that is creating an overlay district for the full development that would have a design book that would guide design regulations for the whole development. As it was mentioned, the total maximum unit count for the development would be almost 1,887 lots, which is actually less, even though it's going to be a mix of housing types. It's actually less than what the current zoning would allow. If you just developed it all as single-family zoning, 50-foot lots that are allowed in the R1B zoning, you could get up to close to 2,200 lots. And a big part of this development, what makes it unique and such a great thing along the river, is that it has 31% of the development is open space or amenity areas, which is about 160 acres of the development, with over a mile of river frontage. That was real important with the developers in the city, that we maintained that open space. It will have sidewalks throughout and trails throughout to connect the development to the river, and then high-quality development standards, including facade variation and diversity requirements, density and product type mix, building height, massing, placement and material requirements, porch requirements, reforms and materials, windows and doors, circulation plans with street, sidewalk, trails, and lighting design, and then signage requirements. There are 4 types of housing product that are identified in the overlay and design book. The yellow area is our single family, and that includes two types of what we're calling traditional and estate neighborhoods. The traditional lots would range in size from 40 to 60 feet wide, with a max unit count of about 880. And then the estate lots are 60 to 80 foot, potentially larger than that. And on those, we put a minimum requirement that will be mixed in with that of 75. So we do want to have those, a minimum of those units in there. And then the moderate density, which are the orange areas on the map, are 0 lot line, townhouse, brownstone product, with a max unit of 232 units in those areas. And then finally the multifamily, which are the brown section of those, which is about 31 acres, with a density of 23 units an acre, which is about 700 units total. And that's an overview of how we structured that. We'll get more into the details of that as it goes through Plan Commission and back to City Council for approval of that overlay. But just wanted to give you an overview of what we're looking for on the zoning requirements.
Would you hand me the keyboard? So Mayor and Council, we wanted to show you all that the proposed timeline for this. The TIF board is scheduled to meet on April 11th to consider, this would cause an amendment to the project and financing plan to add Riverway and the money to the plan. Then on April 16th, Council would have a public hearing in the first reading of the ordinance to amend the project and financing plan. On April 23rd, Plan Commission would have a hearing on the rezoning and the overlay. On May 7th, 2024, there will be the second reading of the ordinance on the project and financing plan, a resolution to consent to the MMD, that's the resolution that Julie referred to, a resolution to approve the development agreement, and a public hearing for the rezoning and overlay. And then finally, on May 21st, 2024, council would have the second reading of the rezoning and the overlay.
The team here gave me the role of doing one slide. And I got cold feet. No, just making sure that I had it right. So I'm going to close out with a summary of the project economics, particularly regarding the city and TERS for public infrastructure reimbursements and project revenues. I won't be covering the MMD side of it, so you'll notice some differences between a number that's been quoted at 102 that I'll show you here in a minute. But the cleanest way to do this is to compare the site's undeveloped condition as it sits today to what's been proposed by the Caldwell team on the Riverway development, and then show the public what the city revenues might be and what the TERS 4 revenues might be. I've also included potential reimbursements to the developer based on the staff's draft agreements. As Jennifer noted earlier, those will be considered at future meetings by the TERS board and ultimately by the city council. Before I get going, the stuff you're going to see on the slide, none of these are going to be perfect down to the penny. There's some caveats or variability that I want to talk to you about. You probably remember the old quote, it's attributed to Mark Twain, that there's three kind of lies. There's lies, damn lies, and statistics. Well, projecting revenues on a project of this size with a lot of variability in timing and market variability certainly would make even the best statistician a liar. So my point is there's some variability to this that will likely shift the revenues and reimbursements to the developers. For instance, for me to run numbers on this project, we're going to show the taxable value at $620 million. And we're going to show that number on the pro forma carrying all the way through 2051. That's a post-construction number, $620 million. Well, what we know about the way the market works is there's going to be appreciation between 2037 and 2051. And so likely there's going to be some positive influence on the revenue number over that period of time. But we stuck with the 620 number because it's what we know today. Another variable I want to mention to you is we've based this pro forma on our current tax rate at 75.5 cents. And the county's current tax rate, and community college district's current tax rate. But what we know is that all three entities over the last few years have been dropping their tax rates. And that could, over time, produce some, what I'll call kind of negative pressure on the pro forma that I'm going to show you, because I fully expect over the next few years we'll continue to try and lower our tax rate. Additional variability is built into the agreement with Caldwell currently that's been referred to as, the reimbursements can vary based on project cost. The development agreement with the developer doesn't necessarily include a reimbursement cap like we normally see in our TERS agreements. It allows for variation kind of on a 5-year capital improvement plan, some variation that it can go up as construction cost estimates go up. And that's something the council will review every 5 years. This, of course, was required because the project is a multi-phase project, and it's going to take years, if not even a decade or more, to build out. And it's hard to estimate construction costs over that long period of time. That could put negative pressure on some of the revenue numbers. I think the negative pressure I'm talking about, referring to on construction cost escalations, will likely be significantly offset by the first factor that I mentioned, the setting the taxable value at 620. That's going to go up, and the cost may go up as well, but they'll kind of keep each other in check. Again, significantly offset likely by that appreciation that I mentioned. So let's walk you through two scenarios. I'm going to do one on the left and one on the right. Here it is, hopefully. There it is, okay. So today, on my left, we have what the project, or what the property is currently valued at. $527,000 is its taxable value. It's sitting in ag status, that's why it's so low. And from 2027 to 2051, that's going to generate the city's general fund about $123,000 if it were to remain in an undeveloped condition. On the right, you have what the Riverway and the Caldwell team has put together. A great project, clearly. $620 million is what we ran the pro forma based on. Again, we kept that level across the whole 25-year period. That would generate $29 million to the city's general fund through 2051. That's a cumulative number. It's not a net present value. It's a cumulative amount of money over the 25-year time period. You'll recall that when we set up TERS 4, the reason there's an inflow to the city's general fund is because we set up a 70% TERS 4. So we do retain some dollars in the general fund in this TERS as the increment grows. And that $29 million is reflective of that remaining 30% that flows to the general fund. In addition to the $29 million I mentioned, the city's general fund revenue, the total estimated revenue to the TERS 4 from this project is estimated at $112 million. That's that third line on the right. Approximately $93 million of which will be reimbursed to the Caldwell Companies through 2051, providing an estimated approximate retained revenue for TERS 4 that it could use for other projects between 2030 and 2051 of $19.5 million. As Julie referred to earlier, that repayment schedule is light on the TERS 4 side in the early years, meaning there's a small amount of money in the early years to the TERS 4 for retainage that will grow towards the back end of the term of the agreement. So that 19 is not spread evenly across 25 years. Rather, it's smaller on the front end and larger on the back end. Make sure I've covered everything. So, kind of to help us simplify it, about 83% of the TERS 4 revenue generated by this project will be given back to the developer over time in the form of reimbursement. And that would be combined with the MMD revenue to support all the public infrastructure required of such a project. A couple of things that I did not do, I tried to get this down to like one slide, easy to condensed, easy to look at it simply, but a couple of things that I did not do is I've not accounted for the upside of general fund revenues after 2051. For a couple of reasons, because the TERS will eventually go away at that point, and all the revenue would be coming back to the general fund, and it's a sizable amount of money. But that also is in 2052 when I'll be 70.
Nothing wrong with 70.
Amen.
Kind of young when you think about it.
Yes.
Nothing wrong with 70. And in fact, I looked it up. That'll be. We'll have a full solar eclipse in Florida that year, so I'll probably be in an RV chasing a full solar eclipse in Florida. So I've not accounted for that, A, because it's far out. The other thing I've not done is analyzed other development scenarios that could occur on this property that may or may not require the amount of reimbursements that are proposed in this agreement. It is conceivable the property could develop in a few different ways. Still, I think it'd be an exercise, a lengthy exercise, likely in futility, to venture a guess at the what, when, and how the property would develop. So I've not done that. So I've given you a left and a right. I've given you what we know is happening today on the left, and I've given you what's in front of us with the team at Caldwell on the right, trying to boil it down into a simple look. That was my objective, and hopefully it's helpful as you get to deliberate the public policy behind such a move at this point. So we'll take any questions from the council to any of our team members that are here at the table.
I want to jump in with a quick question that I just want to make sure I'm understanding the structure of this right, because that $112 million does seem significant, and it is, but am I right that the way that this has been structured is that, or sorry, the 93 million and the 112 million, but the 93 million reimbursements over the 25 years are only from the increased tax revenue generated from this project? Said differently, I know that this has been described as an eat what you kill incentive structure. So the reimbursements for the infrastructure and incentives come from the property taxes generated on this site, the increased property taxes generated on this site. Is that correct?
Yes, the tax increment from the site. Now, true, the city money will be the increment generated from the property. What they put down in value, they'll get back. Obviously, the MMD will levy a tax.
Yes, the MMD
Right.
will, which
Correct.
is not what I'm trying to clarify. I think, and I think it's important for the public to know when they see this number. I think it's important for the media reporting on this to note and report to our constituents that as we consider this incentive structure, that the city is not taking money, pools of from a city street fund or the police fund or from our water budget or even other TIF 4 projects, that this incentive is going to be reimbursed to the developer out of the increased property taxes that this project itself will generate. Is that right? And I just think that headlines can throw people off when they see the city is contributing this amount of money. That doesn't mean that we don't need to go deep, ask questions, have a robust policy debate about this issue. I think we do. But I think that that's an important clarification for this particular structure, because sometimes people think that we're taking money from increasing support to our police department or funding someone else's city streets for this project, and that's not the incentive structure that we're talking about here. Correct? Yeah. Correct.
Mayor, may I add a comment there too? I do think it's also important that because this is the first special district where bonding and that type of reimbursement is being made, there's also the fact that the developer is funding the construction, they're funding and constructing it, and the taxable value has to be realized and sustained for a period of time before those reimbursements can go out and be bonded, because they're going to be underwritten just like a city's bond would. So there's a level of kind of at risk, if you will, that the project's successful or the reimbursements don't occur because there's nothing to come to if the houses aren't absorbed and the construction activity doesn't actually materialize.
That's good.
So
go ahead, Councilman.
I was like, go deeper on that as far as timelines.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question.
What that looks like because I understand that the developers are absorbing that burden, the initial burden of which is what you do.
Right.
But help me understand about,
So I think, I don't know if it was Julie or Jennifer, I can't recall which one spoke to the phasing, but it was mentioned that there are multiple phases in this project. And so if you want to think about the reimbursement structure, it kind of marries the phases, right? Okay. So if you, the first, I think in the projections, right, if you start construction, we were hoping to be done a little bit earlier and starting construction, very first part of next year or end of this year. But if you did that and you have houses on the tax rolls that are completed in 25, right? You wouldn't really be in a position to float your first reimbursement until probably 27. And then you would have tranches of repayment as additional houses come on board. But each year or so after that, they start out a little bit small and they get a little bit bigger in the middle, and then they kind of stabilize towards the end. And I want to say there are probably 10 years of that. Roughly. So it's not, it's not a one-time of that. You have to sustain the success with each phase of the construction for the model to work.
But y'all are paying for everything up until that point.
Well, you're paying for it, yes.
Correct, yes.
Until, yeah, that's correct.
And I I think, we're not voting on this tonight. I know council can have questions. We can look at spreadsheets and go as deep as council needs to get clear on this. It is an aggressive incentive, but it's also a unique opportunity that we're facing to have this number of single-family homes be placed in proximity to our downtown. And I mean, when we look at our housing plan and we look at our goals for downtown, it really is a unique opportunity. So I'm not trying to stifle questions from council right now. This is a great chance to ask away. We got outside counsel and developer and the dream team on our city staff all at the table. So great time to ask questions, but also if you, between now and whenever that calendar is of when it comes back to us, there'll be opportunities for us to go as individually as deep as we want to with staff to make sure that we're really clear on the implications of this model.
So I'm familiar with MUDs, but so MMDs are there. It's taxed like those are, and it's just an additional tax that those homeowners will pay. But those tax dollars then go back to the upkeep of said infrastructure within the MMD.
How's that different than a HOA? We're used to HOAs here. We're not used to MMDs here. Is there a?
It's actually fairly similar. I mean, us as a developer, we're gonna have to sell that value to someone. It's like you're gonna live in a nicer community, everything's gonna be, with different standards and these things, and because of it, there's gonna be an incremental tax. So it'll feel similar.
To the HOAs that we know, there's HOAs all over Waco where people have.
They have to pay fees.
Yep.
But they don't have to come to us for them.
No, they don't.
That's right.
It's their choice.
That's right.
Clint, I don't know if it's a question or just a comment. I don't want to be, with my development, I say mine, Floyd Casey.
Come on.
And this one. I don't want the city to be put in any kind of position that they're going to have to think, well, which one are we going to fund? Which one are we going to help? Which one are we, I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yep. I think that from a funding perspective, what I think, and again, we can get with staff and talk about it, but from a funding perspective, this incentive structure, that's how this is structured. They get their incentive out of the taxes that their deal generates, so it can't compete. It won't compete with other funds. Now, from a
market, heard that from the mayor. It will not compete. No.
From a market perspective, I think the other thing is we can look at our housing study to see the demand for housing stock. And the other thing I would say is that Floyd Casey, I believe, is going to be a good bit ahead of this development in terms of coming online from a housing stock perspective.
I've got another question.
Let me,
Clint,
go ahead.
You have on the tip timeline that you're going April the 11th to ask for funding, or why so soon? Why are we doing it? I mean, we're just not talking about this, but April 11th, they're going to go before TIF.
We're attempting to be very responsive to the developer's request. But I'll let Sarah speak to that timeline.
Sure. We've had that application in since November.
Well, I didn't know that.
Right. And I would say our goal has been all along was to be in a position to break ground this year. This is it's a big project. It has a lot of nuance that has taken a long time to work through. And so we frankly were hopeful that we would be on an earlier TERS agenda, and there were just some delays that were unforeseen. And so we're trying to make up for that time and be able to still hopefully be in a position to move forward by the end of the year, early next year. We are, it may seem short in window, but we've been working on this, I think, for 18 months with staff and are ready to close it out.
I'm glad you have been, but I was not aware of that, so that's why I asked that question.
Thank you.
Bradley, you were going to respond to something.
Yeah, there were two questions I thought were really, really good. First one on the HOA versus MMD, I do think it's important to say it will feel like, to Peter's point, it will feel like maybe on the ground, they're similar, but from a statutory standpoint, the MMD operates with very similar powers and authorities to a city. So if you don't pay your MMD bill, there's very real resolutions that can take place by the MMD that maybe a HOA doesn't have the ability to do. The second thing I wanted to highlight on Councilman Rodriguez's point about making sure that Floyd Casey still has its funding model and TERS 4, and we're not turning our back on that. That is all true, but it brings up a very important point that TERS 4, and you'll hear a little bit later from Jeremy Casina on another TERS 4 project down in the Industrial Park District. We have lots of projects loaded up in TERS 4, lots of big projects. And as Sarah talked about value coming on the rolls, that has a very real impact on us for TERS 4 for prospective projects, the next set of projects. It won't hurt the projects we've already necessarily approved, but as people come to me for TERS 4 support, I will need to see another tax roll, for instance, or two before you'll see another big project in TERS 4. Because we got to get some of this stuff underway and on the rolls and see what the implications are to TERS 4. So I thought that was a good question and an opportunity for me to say that publicly, that that's where we're going to be in TERS 4.
Help me understand that, because I get that that's how it plays out, but if it is a eat what you kill deal where the increment is generated or the incentive is generated from the increased property taxes that are collected, if there's other projects that come on and are proposed, it's not like this pocket of money, since the incentive is from. So I guess explain that to me, how if this is only going to be incentivizing the deal that out of the property collected from the boundaries of the project, how does that put us in the red for other future projects?
It doesn't put us in the red. What it does is so the obligations that we set up on the industrial park deal, Floyd Casey, this deal, each of those require some amount of coverage, because we could have variability in one or two taxpayers in that district that we can't control that result in negative pressure on the overall fund. It doesn't change a Floyd Casey outcome. It doesn't change a Riverway outcome. What it does is create overall pressure on the fund. And we have a couple of property taxpayers we're adding to TERS 4 that are bigger than towns around us from a property tax value standpoint. GPI for one, and it's in this district. And variability, especially on the commercial side, can produce lower revenue numbers than anticipated, which could impact our ability on future deals. And I'll feel better in the future for other projects if we can get a tax roll or two down the road before we structure another large project.
Agreed.
It's about coverage.
Agreed, but when it comes to this project,
it doesn't change this project. Your comments, eat what you kill, are correct. I just thought Councilman Rodriguez's point is it was looking at Floyd Casey, assurances on Floyd Casey, and what I'm pivoting to is the next Floyd Casey or the next big project. I will want to see a tax roll or two before I put another big project in front of you.
And for
it
the
will
cheap
need
seats,
also.
big is what?
What's that?
I said for the cheap seats, big. You consider big what?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, big has gotten a lot bigger these days.
Right.
It really has, which is good. And we've got a lot of great opportunities. It will feel like the responsible thing to do to create coverage requirements so that this can continue to sustain itself over time.
And this may be a Julie question. They mentioned in your intro Cowboy Stadium. So was Arlington involved? Cities that have done this before in this way. Can you talk to me more about that?
Arlington has an MMD called Viridian. You probably heard of it within the boundaries of the city. It was on a 2,000-acre piece of land that had never been developed in the city. It had some serious and expensive drainage issues related to it, and they couldn't find a way to do it otherwise. So they did create an MMD, but this was back in 2009, I believe, and they created it by special legislation. It has some additional powers that Riverway wouldn't have being created under the statute. The city does give a portion of their tax. They give a tax increment over. The county participates, the college district participates, and I believe the hospital district participates. Same structure though. I think that's where all the MMDs these days are getting their ideas from Viridian, because it's a double barrel pledge, right? So the district issues bonds backed by their unlimited tax, but they use the revenue that comes over by contract from the TERS to essentially buy down that tax rate. Essentially, it's what it does. It allowed the developer to issue more and sooner. Viridian is probably going to be built out in less than 5 years. And I think the developer will be fully reimbursed from the amounts that were voted, that the district voted, probably in another 2 to 3 years, which is pretty fast considering the first bond issuance was in 2011. And then it took 4 years before there was enough value to do any more. So that is the one I am most familiar with. That is that model. And they do have a development agreement between the city and the district, like we're envisioning here, that sort of puts some guardrails around what the district was able to do. That has been successful. I think it went from, I think when it was vacant land, it was maybe $6 million, and now it's, oh gosh, don't give me the line. I want to say it's really close to $1 billion now, if not over.
Thank you. That's great. I am so sorry, but I forgot your name, sir, from Caldwell. Yeah. Peter. Thank you so much for taking time to come down here and present this to us today. And staff, thank you for putting together your end of it. It's all hopefully really well received and super informative. Peter, you mentioned during your presentation that sort of a guiding principle for you guys is asking the question of how does this improve people's lives? This is not a gotcha question. There's not a right answer here, and I've got an inkling as to what you may even say, but how does this here and now being the proverbial now, between now and the next 10 years, improve lives of Wacoans?
So how does this?
Yeah, this specific project.
So,
as you're asking yourself, getting ready to move forward with it.
It's a similar theme for any community project. I mean, it's like the things that make you feel really good about a project is when you drive into it and there's things that you've spent hours laboring over in the design decisions and creating and trails and amenity centers, and you drive through a community and there's an Easter egg hunt going on. And there's 600 kids there. Those are things that fill me, that fill my soul, and I think most of us on that team. But it's just making people's lives better.
Yeah.
Connecting people in the community. Getting people out of their homes. That's something we focus a lot on. Like in Town Lake, we have over 200 lifestyle events every year. And what that means is we have a lifestyle team that's all they do is they wake up every day and they figure out, how am I going to get you out of your home? How am I going to get you, out of your backyard and, and around your neighbors and in community with each other? Because I just think that builds healthier relationships for all of us long term. So it's not going to be different probably for Riverway than it is for a lot of our other projects. I think that similar theme just kind of permeates what we do and what we love to do.
Yeah. I definitely agree with the idea of getting people around their neighbors and out of their homes and into community is better for all of us. Quick point of clarification, the funds generated by the MMD as serving as the de facto HOA, as we've established here, that pays for a lot of the lifestyle events and staffing and things like that?
Probably no. They're actually hard improvements.
Okay,
but,
great.
Most of the in similar where we've got different public finance mechanisms. The MUD district or management district might pay for water, sewer drainage, detention, roads to a degree, but the lifestyle events, no, they're taken care of through HOA dues.
Awesome. And then just a couple more. Sorry. I am always caught in the tension as a public servant of new development being exciting, and this is very, very exciting, especially providing connectivity along the Riverway and the public access there. I'm always torn between the excitement of that and then the reality that new development is a great way for cities to generate cash quickly, but typically leaves us with a lot of money left to pay out in infrastructure in the long run. And this deal is structured in a way that I feel good about. It's not that is not what I'm getting at. I'm really just stating this to say that, if there was a run on municipalities like there was on banks in the Great Depression for infrastructure needs, every single city besides maybe 10 in the country right now would be belly up. And so I'm always caught in that tension of, what can we generate for long-term infrastructure needs versus what are we giving up to provide the object that generates that. In this instance, it would be this potentially really beautiful development and community. So I'm just stating that is not a question, but it is a real reality that is being weighed at least by one council member in terms of what we are setting out to do and also what obligations we have otherwise. And then I guess lastly, I would say, two more questions. One will be kind of quick, I think you can answer it quickly. In my really cursory research of municipal management districts, it seems that for infrastructure needs that you guys are responsible for during the duration of the time you're responsible for them, if they arise, you have an election to levy some sort of tax to pay for that. Is that correct?
Correct.
I would assume it's a formality. Most people want infrastructure where they live, and it's sort of just a part of the governance of it. It's not. So in the event that you host an election, it does not pass, and there's this glaring infrastructure need, does it just stay that way, or who foots the bill on that?
You want to answer that one?
Well, that's all done at the very beginning. So all the elections for debt and the election for the maintenance tax would happen when there's very few people out there.
Oh, great.
So you would only have it that one time at the beginning, and they generally don't have another election in their life.
That's the point of clarification I needed. I wanted to make sure it wasn't a recurring election situation, sort of like with individual bonds and things like that. So, and I might have forgotten my last thing. Oh, I remembered it now. And this is another one that is not a gotcha question. I have an inkling of where you're landing on this, and it is more to get it on the record, but is this deal viable for you under any other cost and reimbursement structure? And I'm not coming at this from the standpoint of you guys are asking for too much. I understand it doesn't make dollars, doesn't make sense, you can't do it. I just want to be crystal clear moving forward as we prepare to vote on this.
So large projects just generally don't make sense unless you've got some sort of a public finance mechanism. You can look just outside of Texas, and you can look at states in the United States that are home to the best master plan communities. They've all got a public finance mechanism. They look different, they call them different names, but they all have them. And it's in absence of this, what would likely happen to a project like this in Waco or another market, is that you end up having small communities developed over time. Because the burden of getting that private, those private financing sources versus having access to a public debt market, it makes it cost too much. And you can't afford to do the things that everybody loves and make these communities special.
Yeah, and council member, if I can add to that, I think one of the interesting things for this one, the numbers are obviously so big compared to what any of us, somebody who lives here as well, are used to seeing. And projects of this scale really, that the public finance piece is really part of the solution and utilizing all of the different tools. I think the interesting thing that, when I think about why I work with a project like this and be a part of a project like this, to me, if Waco is going to begin dreaming big for these things, it's doing it in places that have more of an impact than they otherwise would. And for a MUD, you could run 20 miles outside of town and come seek consent and levy the same amount that you're going to levy in the combination of the MMD and the TERS. But the opportunity for Waco to figure out how to do this very complex thing on a piece of property that's so close to the central business district, to the surrounding core of the city, and can really hopefully be an impetus for surrounding developments and helping the city reach its goal of bringing new homes into the core of the community, into the heart of the city. To me, if you're going to try to do the first largest master plan community that the city's ever seen and use some tools that we've never done before, it's an opportunity to do it where it's going to be way more impactful than if you're running way down any highway we want to name, right? And so I think that's part of the thing that we get excited about in talking about this. It's been a very complicated journey to get here, but we're hopeful that it isn't just the vision of the Caldwell team, but it also helps the city achieve some of its vision as well.
Yeah, that's a really great way to say that. I appreciate that. And I'm all for any number of people we can get into these at least beautifully rendered homes near our city's core to spend their time and their money downtown, especially with the big plans we have on the horizon for downtown that we're going to need bodies in place for. So I appreciate all of that. Peter, you've been more than gracious in answering all of my questions. Thank you.
Holmes here. Peter, that great presentation, and team, great presentation. Lot to love about this thing. I mean, this is a big project. Caldwell, you're a quality partner. The principals in this deal are just great. I mean, I know a lot of the folks that are putting this together. Big project, 500 acres. I mean, just going down the list, a marina, almost 2,000 resi units. A big part of it in open space, green space, which I love. So 22 acres of commercial. So, and this is in a part of town that's kind of been hibernating, I guess, forever. You know, I think there was some talk about this being developed 25 years ago, and it just hasn't happened. So I like the fact that a big part of this is housing stock, which we do need, and it puts these residences downtown, closer to downtown. It says 2 miles, but it feels even closer than that. I'm kind of like Councilmember Bearfield. I'm pretty familiar with the MUDs, but I need to still study up on the MMDs, so I'll do my own research on that. If you have something to send to me, let me know. And on this one, I guess I say eat what you kill, but it's really the city is sort of cash neutral, is what I'll say, because in one way, because as the value is built up by the developer, the increment becomes larger, but the increment is basically dedicated back to the developer for all the improvements that are coming in here. So I would say, I guess it's eat what you kill, but it's more like, you know, if you're going to build the value there, it's either worth, like on this slide up here, it's either worth $500,000 or $620 million. You're going to make it worth $620 million. So the cost that it takes to get it there, you're scraping out of the TERS increment, basically, if I'm understanding it right, Sarah.
I mean, yes, I think the benefit that comes back in the form of reimbursements, that $93 million, if you do the TERS retainage at 19, the city component, as well as the county and the community college who are also collecting theirs, I think of the entities participating, there's $72 million going back to the general fund of those entities and or TERS 4 in the same period of time that $93 million is coming back. So it's definitely one where there is more going to the developer, but there is a tangible net benefit to both the general fund and the TERS for both of those entities. The model that was talked about in Viridian, for instance, there 100% of the TERS goes to that development. It's 85% of the increment goes to that development from the city. I think it's lower for the other taxing jurisdictions. So this is a deal structure that has some net benefit improvement over some of the models that are out there in the state.
And then the improvements, I don't know if this is just the wobble factor in putting the models together, but we were talking about 102 in one, and then this is 112, or is that just interest carry? Or?
Yeah, so the 112 is actually the amount of revenue that the development will generate in TERS 4, so just in property taxes, the 70% of the property taxes that goes into TERS 4.
I guess I'm comparing
it's more than...
I'm comparing to the 102 to the 93, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right. So as you can appreciate, the actual reimbursement is not the full 93 because they are through bond issuances, so there's the debt cost. So like the principal portion of the reimbursement between the MMD and the TERS is what equates to the 102 million. But the 93 is a component of that.
Okay. Then there's no, and I guess the other part, and then this is just me getting more familiar with the MMDs on the, are all the roads, drainage, water, sewer, park, all this built up to City Waco infrastructure standards, basic building standards? Nothing more, nothing less?
Well, that's a very good question. There are some site-specific modifications that we have proposed that I would be glad to document in a memo to council over time. Some of those are developer preferences. We have a developer out of Houston that has some preferences related to street standard that I think we completely understand and are on board with. We also made some modifications to drainage given the proximity to the river. But I'd be happy to document those for council.
Great, thanks, Bradley. Then the other thing I'd say, again, I need to get more familiar with it, but the 5-year CIP budget, it's every 5 years we like, I guess I'd want to know, what does the first 5-year budget look like? Is that available?
Give the number and I'll let Julie talk about the mechanics if that's okay, Julie. It's 70 million in the first 5 years. So as you can imagine, the early infrastructure, we're not looking at the map, but the early infrastructure includes some of the really large arterial roads that are more expensive to build. And so it is front-loaded in the amount of expense that the developer's putting in. That's part of the reason the public finance mechanism is so important, because if you're putting in 70 million in the first 5 years, and in that 5-year period you're selling maybe 300 of the homes, the revenue to expense doesn't work. That's where the reimbursements become so critical.
So the deal points as proposed right now have, when y'all consider the master development agreement, y'all will be approving the 5-year budget as part of that master development agreement.
On the very front, the first 5 years, sir.
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Then the last little comment that I have, I mean, there's two ways of looking at this. I know that there's 1,000 ways of looking at it. What am I saying? There's at least 2 ways, though. We could either, residential is kind of achieving what we want. Residential near core, I think, is important to the city and to the council. You could either do this at an organic pace, I'll say. You know, you'd have some hodgepodge building, most likely, 10, 20, 50 acres at a time. And it probably wouldn't, it wouldn't be quite as cohesive of a project, obviously. And it would take time to build out, and it would, we would always kind of guess, well, is that 527 going to kind of, when is that going to happen? 10 years from now, 20 years from now? So I would say that an organic pace would allow, the good part of the organic pace is the fact that the city would keep the TERS, or maybe a larger amount of the TERS increment. So that's, I guess, the weight, the balance we're trying to figure out here. The master plan community, I think, has a lot of benefit to it because we know what's going to be there. We can kind of have a look at it as long as we can kind of contain costs. These are big numbers. And I wish there were ways to phase this in where we could take a little bit smaller bites, but I see that's not the ask here. This is what's on the table. So anyway, I think this is the way we're weighing it. At the end of the day, I like the top number. 620 is a lot nicer than 527,000. And the thing I had kind of lost along the way as I was thinking about this, and Bradley, I'm glad you pointed it out, was the 30%. That the 29 million there, or all the 30 million, is what we would drag in this. It's not part of the developer reimbursement portion, which is not immaterial. But anyway, giving us some stuff to think about for sure, and then we'll have the model sort of refined a little bit more before we talk about this again, possibly? Question mark?
Well, I think the wheels are, we wanted to come here, obviously, for work session and review. But to meet the timeline that city attorney outlined, this is about where it's going to be. We've got to get docs going and TERS board meetings, and this is about, I mean, as the mayor mentioned, I will sit down with each member, go through the spreadsheet, but this is about where it is, given the timeline that's proposed.
And in that one-on-one and sit down, I want to also look at what the guesstimate of increased city services will be. You know, because that's the thing. I mean, you're how many homes?
It's 1,800 units, 1,100 are single-family homes.
Yeah. We do have
And the MMD does have the maintenance on the streets, drainage.
For 5 years?
20 years.
20.
Years. And parks,
Then
sorry,
parks too,
and trails.
But the only obligations on maintenance are water and sewer, and then, of course, there are some other city services you're alluding
Right,
to that we'll be
firemen.
providing.
Absolutely.
Which is why, I think the council was real wise to do a 70%, 30% TIF. Because that's a real cost.
I guess it's
Any other questions? Thank you guys for being here. We appreciate everybody's work on this.